Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I am deeply, deeply honored to be the moderator of this important session. Let me introduce first Fredrik Reinfeldt. He was the Prime Minister of Sweden from 2006 to 2014 and the chairman of the Liberal Conservative Moderate Party from 2003 to 2015. At the age of 41, very young age, he was the third youngest person to become the Prime Minister of Sweden. He was the last rotating president of the European Council in 2009. His first term in office, which started in 2006, was marked by the financial crisis that you already know, and recession of economic recession. And he was re-elected in 2010 because he restored the economy of Sweden to put it into a very strong position. So his popularity was increased, so he was re-elected. It was very good for him. And his policy always focused on getting more people on the job, which is related to today's topic, and giving priorities in climate change and healthcare issues. He implemented an open-door immigration policy. He stepped down from his office and leaving the party and became an author, consultant, and advisor and lecturer. And today he is going to talk about the changing labor market due to the disruptive technological development in education and how educational system must adapt to it. Please give him a big applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, good morning to you all and greetings from Sweden and Europe. I'm going to talk about change. Change is very often something described as 100% positive. My experience is that people love change as long as it has nearly no impact on themselves. So, change is needed for other people, not for me. When change comes to yourself, I've seen many people get stressed and nervous because they have not been well prepared. They have not understood what is coming. Therefore, I think it's important to relate to the global changes that we see, and out of that, draw 5 conclusions which links to individual when it comes to educational system and the labor market. The first, I think, obvious on a day when we have midterm elections in the United States is the fact that we have a geopolitical power shift in the world between the United States and China. It relates, of course, to an increasing risk of a trade war between the two giants, but it has an impact that is actually global. It has an impact on the trading conditions also for other parts of the world. And of course, the question is the world moving away from a rules-based open world trade system that we have lived with since the Second World War over to a system where countries declare their own country's interest first above everything else and engage in protectionism? This is far more important than just related to one country. Why? Because especially for open economies like South Korea and Sweden, I've seen all these entrepreneurs with their growing companies, and very early on in their career, they become export-oriented. Why? Because the home market is too small. So you must be able to sell your products, and in the future also service and your digital services to others. Therefore, you need to meet good rule-based conditions when you trade cross-border. If the new world is creating new and higher thresholds to come into different markets, this might impact our labor markets and especially our biggest companies, the multinational companies that are very often our champions and that we think are forever there to be stronger, but they rely heavily on open trade, which is now put in question. Secondly, and this has also been mentioned now already a few times, what is called the fourth technological revolution. We have, of course, a rapid technological change in the world. This is also very often described as something with just possibilities, just positive. I see, of course, this. There is a lot of new jobs, there is a lot of new innovations that comes out of this. You could see a lot of young people actually starting up with new ideas. I think that's fascinating. But it's also very good in the English language to describe it as disruptive. The ways we have been doing things will not work anymore. It's disruptive in the sense that it shortens the lifespan of all markets, of all companies, of all what we have thought to be safe jobs. Why? Because the changes in the economy will come with an increase in speed, and what very often has been done with manual labor will in the future be done with artificial intelligence and with robots. So the shift is more dramatic than we think, and it has not fully happened yet. A tryout to see the implication on the American labor market, it was an Oxford study who said that might be as much as 47% of the jobs that we have today that actually will be totally gone or totally different in 20 years. We recalculated this on European labor markets and my home labor market of Sweden, and we found the impact to be even greater. So we are talking more than 50% of the jobs gone in 20 years or totally different. This does not mean that we will not see new jobs emerge in other parts of the economy, but the question you must ask yourself is these new jobs open to the ones who lost the jobs that now are gone? Are the individuals movable from one job to another? So I'm not saying we will have less jobs. The question is, what's the impact on the individual level for each and every one of us? When change knocks on your door, are you ready for the digital transformation? And the fact is that a lot of people are not. And instead of trying to embrace and understand what comes, they become part of a movement we see around the world of anti-globalization, saying, this is not about me. This is not my future. It's not creating anything good for me. And we see them getting angry in the voting boxes of Europe, United States, and throughout the world. So don't think this is a little question. This is the question on how to make inclusive labor markets, inclusive impacts of what is, first of all, something very good. But the biggest change, the biggest global change of all is to mankind itself. It has been mentioned that we have a rapid world growth of the population. We are now at 7.5 billion inhabitants on this world, and we will grow up to 10, maybe 11 billion at the end of this century. But as you know, this is done asymmetrically. It's not done evenly in all countries. We already see a standstill in the most developed parts of the world, like Europe, China, linked to the peak child phenomena. The more developed an economy becomes, the less children born by women. Therefore, the situation in Europe is a de facto decrease of the population. It's a standstill of 500 million, but the population as such is decreasing. Until 2050, with the aging of the population, we will have 85 million less in the labor force in European countries 2050 compared to now. If you think that's a huge impact, look at China. The decrease is over 200 million people moving out from the labor market into pension age. This is an enormous transformation in our time. and it comes asymmetrically. The growth of the world population will be concentrated to the least developed part of the world, and after 2050, only concentrated to the African continent, where in many of the African countries we will face an increase of the population which is fivefold compared to today. So it's a totally new world order where you will find the African population at the end of this century come close to the population of Asia. Have we prepared for this? Have we understand what kind of challenges this will create to sustainability, to our labor markets? I think already we have a discussion of shortages of labor supply in Europe and United States. This is only the beginning, given what we see ahead. At the same time, my experts at home tell me that in the most developed part of the world, it might be that half of the children now born in Sweden will live to be 100 years old. So now, welcome the 100-year life. It will be not just one or two odd survivors that will see their own 100th birthday. This will be for very many people. And the enormous increase of older people is really the biggest transformation that we have ahead. When we move from 7.5 up to 10, 11 billion people, there will be no more children, no more teenagers, and they will redistribute more to Africa, less in Europe and in Asia. If this is true, if everything I've now said is going to happen, then we must draw conclusions. What's the impact on the individual level, on the labor market, and on our educational system? And I have 5 conclusions. The first one, there is no such thing as an identity linked to your job that you choose when you're young and never, ever change during your lifespan. Very often we have the idea that we take a decision as young to become a teacher, to become a policeman. That's part of our identity, an identity we bring through our lives and which becomes very important to us because it's who we are. So if people ask, who are you? You answer by telling what you work with, which is, of course, only part of your identity. But if I now told the truth about everything that is disruptive, what about half of the jobs gone in 20 years? And that's your identity. That means the identity will get lost for a lot of people. We must therefore be clear to people saying, your job is not your identity. It's your ability to work that is part of your identity. That is how we open up to rethinking, reskilling, retraining people. Don't say that you are something that you can't change. And since it's linked to identity, it's tougher. It sits deeper with people. If this is true, there is no such thing as a once-in-a-lifetime education part done in young years, which is never to be done again. The idea that we have longer and longer educational systems, preschool, school, high schools, and then universities, but we do it only once. And thereafter, we think, after leaving universities, if we have done so, we think we can live on that through our entire working career, never to see a school book anymore. That's also the wrong perception. Because what we used to learn, if the transformation is as big as I have described, well, it will be obsolete in 10 and absolutely obsolete in 20 years. You must be able to reskill and retrain also when it comes to educational efforts. And we don't have the structures for this. We just think we should add on more years when we are young. But I think it's equally important now to get educational systems. It could be public ones, but it could also be linked inside our companies, where we actually try to get more skills, update ourselves to stay employable also in the future. If this is true, the idea that talent is something you have when you're young once, and you're either successful or then it's gone, is also totally wrong. But that's how we recruit people. We think that we should seek them out at universities, the one with the top scores coming out of universities, that's the one we want to employ. The one person better than the others that we could form and see growing inside our company. That was yesterday. Talent is now something which is open all through your life. You could be a talent at 25, you can be a talent at 45, you could be a talent at 65. It's more your mindset. Have you taken the decision to stay open, to take in new impulses, and to start over and over again in your life with new careers? You could actually reinstall yourself as a talent at different ages. This is a main point when it comes to recruitment, because if talent can be a 45-year-old restarting a second career with a new identity after reskilling, well, then we have a totally new perception of talents all through life. And then we should not just only focus on getting the youngest ones, but actually different ages. This is also important because the impact on the labor market of that is that also older people see that the only way to get a chance at a career is not just being a talent at 28. I could actually get a job, a restart at 45. And just to remind you, what defines a talent at 28 might be very different when you're 45 or you're 55. You have a life experience. As you know, nothing is that simple in life. It's not just a success. You might see trouble. You might have private problems. You might have friends, families, children that run into trouble. This gives you new experiences and creates you more interesting, a kind of talent that knows a lot of things which you don't know when you're young. One thing, though, that is very important, if you're 50, 55 and want to be a talent, don't tell people that the only thing you want to tell them is what you used to do. People are not interested in that. Tell them what you aim to do still in the future, in the years to come. And be humble. We don't like people who say, well, I've learned everything I need, I know everything I need to know, and I'm just here to tell you the story. Not interesting. Not interesting. Be humble, be more employable by also being open to move yourself, to add your skills. If all of this is true, then the idea that the smartest thing you can do, which is very spread here in South Korea and also my country, Sweden, is not to be employed by the #1 biggest company in the country. Why? Well, because the biggest companies are the most likely to be disruptive by the challenges you will see in the markets that is now emerging. Their success will be challenged by others, because that's the idea with the new atmosphere for entrepreneurs, the new ideas emerging. They are looking at the front runners. How did they get successful? How do I reshape the market? And therefore, most of these very big companies that we see today will probably have to downscale themselves in the future. I've seen this happen already with multinational companies in Sweden, and young people think, if I just get a job there, then I'm safe for life. And I can tell you, you have no idea. They might not even be around 20 years from now. Therefore, we must signal that we can not only look at big companies as a way of getting job security in what is now going to be the labor market of the future. No, now you must focus much more on startups, on entrepreneurial projects, what is coming from behind, what is growing out of the grass, because they are more likely to survive at least a little bit longer. So, if all of this is true, we must also shift our perspective when it comes to labor market policy. I was grown up in an atmosphere that the idea was by driving demand, pushing in demand into the economy, when there come a slowdown in the economy, which we always will see, we thought by pushing in demand we could save the jobs. The problem is that it's a little bit shaky now, but soon it will be back again the way it was. We have learned that that's not true anymore. The global changes I've described will not recreate jobs as they were, but as something completely different. Therefore, we must shift focus from increasing demand broadly in the economy to incentivizing individuals to become employable, to reskilling, to retraining. Focus on the individuals, on their motivation, on their ability to see possibilities throughout life. And throughout life, meaning if we live to be 100 years old, probably to push also older people to stay in the workforce with incentives. We had specific tax breaks in Sweden for 65 plus to stay in the labor market, and they have answered to the incentives because they do. When they get more money out of working, and when they could also ask of the employer actually not to work as much as before, but still be part of the workforce, we saw a doubling of the percentage of people above the age of 65 actually keep on working in the workforce. This is just the beginning. If we do all of this, then we will meet the changes by preparing individuals for what is about to come. If we do so, we will have greater support for what we call globalization, fourth industrial revolution. Then it's not just something said by an elite at conferences that do not relate to ordinary people. If we don't do this, then reactions we see out in the voter boxes of the world will continue and increase. So it's extremely important to do this right. Thank you.
Netflix is known for its freedom and responsibility culture. Would you explain what that is? What's the freedom and responsibilities?
Yes, so at Netflix, we believe that if we focus on hiring very talented individuals who possess expertise, no matter whether it's engineering, marketing, or finance, that if we give them an environment where they can do their best work and run, that we reap the rewards. So what we think about with freedom and responsibility is that the deal we make is if we've hired these talented people who are also mature and thoughtful and driven, that we should give them no rules, no process, and we should let them innovate and be creative and run. So, for example, many companies, as they grow, they instill rules and policies and processes to control the growth. What we do is the opposite. We get out of the way. So we don't even have an expense policy. We allow people to spend the company's money as if it were their own. We also don't have a vacation policy. So we don't track how many days people take off. We don't track when they come to work and when they leave. Many people get confused about that it's all freedom, but you have to remember it's also responsibility. They go together, kind of like Kim and Bob.
So when you say freedom to the employee, then you don't give them some sort of goal or the performance target like that? Nothing like that? Or just leave them alone?
Yes, so we don't have traditional performance targets. We may have holistic goals that are multi-year goals. But really what happens for leaders at Netflix is our job becomes not controlling the day-to-day decisions of our people and what they do and how they spend their time. Our job becomes giving really great context and information so that they have all of what they need to make great decisions and move and make the business better.
So freedom means that you don't necessarily control them daily business-wise, but at least you give them a target and as a holistic approach what to do.
We give them context in terms of what the vision is, where we think we should be headed, but they also contribute to that vision and get to help shape it, and it's a process that we're all involved in, and we challenge one another. But when someone holds a job, they have a responsibility, and whether or not those responsibilities are fulfilled are up to them.
Once you leave them alone, do whatever they like to do, okay? Something that we worry is sometimes they waste the time.
Yeah, so I think at Netflix, we focus very much on attributes of people that will be successful within the company. So not only do you have to be skilled, but as I mentioned before, you have to be very mature, you have to be able to make good decisions, you have to be able to work in an unstructured environment, you have to be accepting of change, and you have to be adaptable, and that's not everyone. And again, with the responsibility part, we have hired you to do a certain job, and what we look at is results. And if people are not getting great results, and they're not living up to the responsibility part of the deal, then perhaps they may not be the best fit.
Good, okay. The second question.
Yes.
Netflix makes major bets, investment, and shifts into strategy quickly. First the DVD by mail, then internet streaming, then introduced the original content and launched it globally. What role did the Netflix culture play in this process? How do you think Netflix culture contributed to its rapid growth?
So one of the ways to think about culture is, and the way that we think about it at Netflix, is that it is a strategy. It is what feeds our business. It's how we operate, it's how we communicate, it's how we make decisions. And so I do believe that our culture played a big part in our ability to shift and pivot, because we are not bogged down with rules and processes, and employees are free to come to us with ideas that they think are going to change the game. One of the things that we are very rigorous about at Netflix is testing. So we A/B test and experiment with everything so that we can know where to take things. So a lot of times we have great ideas, but then, we test them and they don't work out. And I think what's great about the culture is that it allows for employees to take risk and to try things and to fail. But through that failure, they're not failures that I would consider are bad. They're actually learnings. And that's how we push the business to be better and better, is by constantly testing and experimenting and changing. And the culture allows for that.
Very great. It sounds great, but supposedly some of your general manager and responsible for the like $1 billion business, he launched something, it failed. Then what do you do?
So a lot of the experimentation that we do on the product is things that are iterative to the experience. And so if you think about the Netflix experience, it's bringing content to people to delight them. And so a lot of what we're testing is how to bring more content to you that you will like and you will want to watch. And then the other that we're experimenting with is making content. And so, we will make content that isn't as appealing to some audiences as others, and some will do well and not well. But if someone makes a bad show or makes a bad test, no, we wouldn't necessarily fire them. But if someone did something that was as egregious as you're discussing, it may make sense to have a conversation.
Right. What kind of incentive system you have?
We don't have an incentive system.
Oh.
No. So we at Netflix believe in paying top of market. So we pay everyone what we deem to be the best of top of market for them as an individual. So we assume that they're going to do great work until they do not. There's lots of research out there that talks about incentives in terms of bonus plans
Right.
and others that don't necessarily get the business the right outcomes. Because one of the things I fear about bonuses, especially with a business like Netflix, is that it's changing and evolving all the time. And if I'm saying your money is dependent on you doing this one thing, but the business has changed and shifted, and I need you to do something else, you're probably not going to do it because you're going to want to make sure that you can take care of your family and afford colleges and all of those things. So your behavior would be to do this versus what we need you to do. So we've done away with, we've never had them, bonuses or incentive plans.
So your incentive plan is not necessarily monetary.
Or
stuff,
incentive
but-
is that we pay you really well.
Yeah, by average you pay well.
Yes.
So even if one guy's made a big success in particular project, but not necessarily monetary compensation, but you may give them a more motivating project for the next step. Is that true?
Sure. I
Similar
mean,
direction?
if you're growing in your career at Netflix, it's likely that you're getting more and more impact and more responsibility. And if you're not performing and getting results, we try to coach you to get you to be better. But if it's not working out, we're also very candid about saying goodbye and saying that it's not a good fit. Because what we're trying to do is have a team that we talk about as being the dream team. And so if you think about baseball, for example, you want to have the best players on the team. That's what we think about at Netflix. And so in baseball, players are traded often, right? Because sometimes
yeah,
you need a hitter.
Yeah,
Sometimes you need a pitcher.
that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we're constantly thinking about who are the right people for the right roles. And sometimes that changes, and we are open and talk about that candidly.
Okay. What do you think is special about the Netflix's hiring process? Whom are you hiring to ensure that the employees make the right decision? Also, what kind of actions does the company take so that the employees can continue to make a right decision or the right business?
Yeah, so I think again, it's we can't ensure that anyone will always make the right decision. I wish that would maybe in AI technology later on we can ensure that everyone makes great decisions all the time. But That's not where we are today. So what we try to do is we try to focus on hiring people who, again, are very talented and skilled, but then have attributes that we know will scale in the company. So a lot of companies in their hiring process may just focus on skills. And as the Prime Minister was saying earlier, they focus on GPA and schools, and we tend not to focus on that as much. So of course we talk to them about what they've done and what they know, but we very much pay equal or more attention to how mature they are, how they make decisions, can they deal with ambiguity, can they manage themselves, can they be critical of themselves and self-reflective about where they need to grow as an individual. And so we again, evaluate the two of those, where I think most other companies maybe spend 80% on the skills and grades, and we spend a bit more time on the attributes.
We do sort of manufacturing business. In your case, it's business-oriented and more creative content creation like that. But in Korea, we more focus on discipline, teamwork,
Yes.
or performance of all company, or the community-wise like that. Compared to yours, freedom is individual empowerment and responsibility. So it's a quite different culture. And how do you compare them?
Well, I think they're similar in many ways. As we were discussing last night at dinner, we talked about discipline, for example. And for me, I think you're either a disciplined person or you're not.
Right.
It's more of an attribute, or what I would say DNA. I can't make you be more disciplined. I can't, same with maturity. You're either mature or you're not. I can tell you why being mature is important, but that doesn't mean that you will become more mature overnight. And so again, that's where the attributes are really important. And at Netflix, we are very much a team. As I said before, because again, we're all sort of focused on bringing all this content to people and delighting them. So we're all driven towards the same mission and the same outcome, but we all have different responsibilities that make that come to fruition. So if the team isn't operating successfully, then we won't be able to delight our customers and our subscribers. So we talk about things like communication. One of the things that we talk about in our freedom and responsibility culture is, as teams, we need to be highly aligned and loosely coupled. And so that means that teams have their own ability to make decisions and do what they need to do within their function, but they have to be aligned as a whole so that they're not making decisions that impact and hurt the other teams, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. I think it really depends on your own natural business. But in the other company, supposedly, we develop a big software, and then they should work together as a teamwork.
Yeah.
And in that regard, you cannot leave them alone. You cannot be free, because all these schedules and individual parts that they are responsible should be done very concurrently.
Sure.
So-called concurrent engineering is necessary there. Then how do you leave them alone?
Well, I think if
In that
everyone...
regard, discipline is very important.
Sure, but if everyone knows the schedule and everyone knows the mission of what we're trying to accomplish, it should be pretty easy to back away and let them do the work. I think as leaders, we think a lot about that we have to have control, and if we don't have control, then we won't get the right outcome. But I think if you shift your view as what your job is as a leader is to coach and give context,
Okay.
then people will then make good decisions. It's very rare that people make horrible decisions that take down the business. So again, you have to trust in the process.
I see,
But if
okay.
you change your role as not the controller and the dictator to you're the coach and the context giver.
I have several portfolio companies that need to develop big softwares, something not existing within company, something new, even new to even other countries. But in that sense, what happened is I'm asking them to develop such something very new, very novel things. And then they listen to me and they say, okay, it's vision, and they have to do it, right? And then a couple of months later, those guys come to me and said they want to quit the company. Gosh, it was really shocking news. Why your company? This is something new. It's very important for your career because you can learn a lot of new things from that. And if that works, and we'll give you a lot of incentives, and even promotion together. But the guy simply said, I'm going to quit the company. I was really shocked. Why you do that? He said, it's too difficult. Answer is very simple. It's another discipline. They want to just leave a company because it's too difficult. If you face such a problem, what do you do?
I say goodbye.
True.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, when you're hiring people, it's kind of like getting married and not knowing anything about each other, and you're making this commitment to each other. But and the interviewing process is inherently flawed because it's humans interviewing humans. Right? And humans are flawed, right? And we come with all types of biases and things. And so we make the bad call. And sometimes employees make the bad call because they end up finding out that it's too hard or they're not as passionate about it. And so I think it's silly for businesses to think that once we hire someone that it's a lifelong commitment toward one another, because it is not. And as the Prime Minister was saying earlier, like, you're going to change your career many times over these days and learn many things, so your passions change. And I think for me, if someone isn't feeling passionate about what we're doing and wants to leave, that's something I celebrate. Because I think that's a good thing for them to go do what makes them happy. Because what we want is people that are, invested and passionate about this. But I would never assume that everyone we ever hired, that's going to be the case for them forever.
In the hiring process, I'm pretty sure that you have many competitors.
We do.
Next neighbors, right? Like Apple,
Yes,
Google, Amazon,
Facebook.
all your
Yeah.
severe the competition there, I think. What's unique about the Netflix to hiring talents from the market?
Yeah, so again, this is where we focus on what people are passionate about, because when we're hiring, and let's say someone's interviewing with us, but they're also interviewing with Facebook, if they're more passionate about building the world's largest social network, then Facebook's a better fit for them. If they're more passionate about allowing creators to tell stories around the world and delighting consumers with content, then we're maybe the right place for them. So we're very open and honest in the process about what's in their heart and what they really want to do. And a lot of companies think about that you have to have bells and whistles to attract people and retain people. And I'm not a believer in that, because people don't get up in the morning because you give them free lunch to come to work. They come because they are challenged by the problem. They're surrounded by people that inspire them and that they can learn from. They feel like they can make an impact and have freedom and empowerment to do great work. And generally, they need to be paid well, but they don't always have to be paid the best. And if you have those things, then people generally stay and are happy for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, these motivations for work or the incentive system should be different from class to class. Like just the labor people, they may looking for a higher salary. But I strongly believe that like engineers, talented engineers, they are not sticking there because of a slightly higher salary. It's not the case.
No.
They are looking for recognitions, like
Right.
new technologies,
Right.
new equipment company provider. Right? Oh, they like that, and they prefer to stay because of those benefits, not necessarily monetary benefits.
That's right.
In Netflix, do you treat them different way, like administration guys
No,
and engineer guys and
no, we treat
Treat them differently?
everyone the same.
same?
Yeah, so we pay everyone top of market for their type of role, and everyone, the culture applies to everyone. So we don't have different culture for our operational teams versus our creative teams versus our engineering teams.
Very interesting. Then within your company, after you hire some talents, so how do you retrain them? Supposedly some guys out of date because of all these technologies advances so quickly, right? Some guys, it's a little bit out of date. Then what do you do with them?
Well, I mean, hopefully we don't get so far out of touch because Netflix is an evolving technology company. But our people are, constantly going to conferences, taking classes,
okay.
up-leveling their technical talents or their skills, so that they are current and
So
stay ahead.
you encourage them to
Yes.
participate in other forums and
Yes,
conferences
yes,
within company too.
yes.
Okay, so basically train them either for themselves or the company train
Yes,
them.
and if generally if they're not interested in doing that, then maybe it's not a good fit.
I'm pretty sure that it is very, very difficult for large corporates such as Netflix to go under cultural change. Do you have any suggestion to companies that are trying to implement something similar to freedom and responsibility, particularly to Korean corporates? Do you have any
Sure.
advice for them?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies, again, they think about culture as perks and benefits that you need to have to retain people. But really, I think you should think about culture as an operational framework, how your company operates, how you make decisions. And this is the guideline that you give to employees so that they can be successful. Freedom and responsibility likely won't work for every company. If you're in pharmaceuticals and you're making drugs that can impact people's lives, you likely need to have a little bit more structure. But as leaders, I think what we need to think about is creating environments that allow people to unlock their skills and do their best work. And again, generally that's not through controlling them. Generally that's through empowering them and giving them a bit more room to run, make mistakes, and learn. And my advice is to let go and trust a bit more and think about your job as the coach versus the controller.
There's several questions here to ask. You mentioned that Netflix poses no incentives on workers. Without incentive for extraordinary performance, though, I believe people would only perform to a level of being mediocre or just to the level of not getting fired. Very interesting question. It's a good question.
It's a good question.
Very honest answer, please.
I will give an honest answer. So again, we pay the top. So if you went out to go to a different company, likely it would be hard to get paid better. And so and I think our employees know that they're paid the best. And so they don't really have to think about their compensation. They really just have to focus on the goal. And I think companies, again, try to use incentives to inspire better work, but I've found, and research has found, that that doesn't always work. Really what inspires people is when they are really passionate about the problem that they are trying to solve, and they are inspired by the people surrounding them that challenge them to think differently and they can learn from. And that's where great work happens. And what we see is that not only do people perform at a very high level, they go above and beyond because of this. So, and then again, at Netflix, if someone isn't performing or is just doing mediocre, we are happy to say goodbye.
In Korea, also, the prevailing story is that whoever did a better perform results, then they should be compensated by monetary basis.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily things within the Netflix.
Yeah, again, we're already paying at the top, so they're
Okay,
already making
good.
the money. But I think in terms of compensation, it's interesting. Historically, when companies are starting out and they're building out how they should pay their people, everybody pays everyone the same. Every company structures salary, bonus, and maybe some equity. And at Netflix, we said, well, why does that have to be the case? And so we rethought things. And I think more companies need to think about that instead of just saying, oh, well, so-and-so company did it this way, so we need to do it this way. Every company is different, and every employee base is different, and the problems you're all trying to solve are very different. So,
And you spoke all the good things about the Netflix. I think there is a question online, and there's a question asking that what's your most concerned things within company?
So I would say my biggest concern is as we grow around the world and we have employees in many different countries and most of our offices are far away from each other, I worry about our ability to communicate and be effective and make sure that we're building an environment that is understanding and inclusive of different cultures and thoughts and being cognizant of time zones and language barriers. And so one of the things that we're really pushing at Netflix is for everyone to increase their global IQ. And so to travel, to understand different markets, to understand different regions, and to think about how we can communicate more effectively as a team.
Now you started having presence in Korea, right? So your subsidiary, whatever, the branch office in
We
Korea.
have, yes, we have a
How
small
do you treat
office.
them? Do you treat them not differently from others?
No, we do treat them differently
Very good,
from many
very good.
others.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of getting better at it. But it is hard to, with time zones to communicate and to have great, effective dialogue that makes the business more effective. So we work hard to do that.
Maybe perhaps a last question as
Sure.
a personal question.
Oh,
When you come back to Netflix after 2 years of absence,
yeah.
how do you feel about it? I mean, the culture may be different from what you were before. And
Yes.
how did you adjust it yourself to meet the difference in the culture-wise?
So I was with Netflix for around 8 years, and then I left for about 3.5 years, and then I came back. And the company in that 3.5 years had changed a lot. We were much more global. We were making a lot more content, and we were much more larger. But the value system that we had was still the same.
Oh.
And so that was something that I didn't have to adjust to, but I had to adjust to how it is applied to a much larger organization and company. And so that was exciting for me, but also different and a challenge.
이거로 끝을 하겠습니다. 제가 상당히 좀 까칠한 질문을 좀 하고 있는데도 상당히 회사의 정책이나 이런 걸 잘 말씀을 해주신 제시카 님한테 큰 박수를 해주시기 바랍니다. Okay, great job. Thank you.